Next time you step into a meeting room, do you know the 5 principal positions in the meeting room and the power dynamics that they represent? If you don't, then by the end of this video, you will. The first position is the power position, the position adopted by the apex player, the most important person in the room. This is about 2 things. It's about geometry and it's about view. And it's geometry that usually comes first. The power player likes to be at the end of a table. When you've got a long table, they like to be sitting at one end of it. And if they can't occupy an end, then the second power position is the middle, where they are the centre of attention. But if there is no end and there is no middle, if you're sitting at a round table, then view is what matters. And whilst there are no hard and fast rules, the first thing that usually matters is view of the door. The power player likes to be able to see the door because we all feel slightly uncomfortable when we've got our backs to the door. So the power position is directly opposite the door. If you've got a long table, which end will the apex player want to sit at the end which gives them the best view of the door or gives them the least exposure of their back to the door? Of course, we also like a view of the action if there are presentations or key speakers, and so the apex player will want a good view of that. Third, they may also want a good view of the participants. That's why the end of the table or the middle is ideal. It gives them the widest view. And finally, if all of that is equal, the last thing is a view of the window. If there's a window in the room, the apex player would prefer to be able to look out of it rather than have their back to it, and therefore risk, if something happens outside, other people being able to see, but them not. The second type of position are what I call the primary and secondary positions, either side of the apex player. So the primary advisors, the primary confidants, the people who assist and help the apex player will sit near to them. And therefore the places immediately to their left and immediately to their right are the primary and secondary positions. And usually the primary position, the position reserved for the person closest to the apex player, the one whose advice they most value, or the person whose company they most enjoy, will be to their left. This is their ally, and also the person who can bask in the reflected glory. The left-hand side is the best position to sit in if you want to influence the apex player. The person on the right is more often invited to be there, is there to render some form of assistance. Because if I am most easily influenced by the person on my left, the person I can most easily influence is the person to my right, for whom I am on their left. Next are the tertiary positions. Positions in the room with a clear view of the apex player, and therefore whom the apex player can see easily. The level of influence you'll have over the apex player from one of the tertiary positions depends on 2 things: proximity and eye contact. The nearer you are, the more influence you have, and the stronger the eye contact, and therefore the most direct line you have, the more influence you're able to have. The person who is distant from the apex player but easy for them to see is someone who chooses to be seen, not heard. Their influence is subtle, indirect. They can influence the apex player through body language, through gestures and facial expressions. The person who wants to be heard by the apex player needs to sit as close as they can. The fourth position is the position I call the antagonist position. the position adopted by people who want to take a contrary view, an opposite view to that of the apex player. This could go all the way to being an adversarial position. And not surprisingly, it's directly opposite the apex player, because their position is directly opposite to theirs in some sense. Sitting directly opposite to the apex player gives you good, strong eye contact, and they see you with the full width of your body, making you appear at your strongest. For many table arrangements, this is also the position with the greatest distance between the antagonist player and the apex player, marking metaphorically the greater distance between their points of view. And just like the apex player has their acolytes sitting immediately to their left and to their right, the antagonist player is likely to accumulate their supporters immediately near them, directly opposite the apex player and her or his supporters. The final positions are the supporting positions, and these are the positions adopted by people who are not directly involved in the conversation. They may be advisors and counsellors or juniors who need to attend the meeting but not participate actively in it unless called upon to do so. They may also need to be able to do things that would be disruptive if they were sitting around the table, like refer to notes, go through files, or step out of the meeting. Therefore, these people tend to be away from the table, behind the main players, usually close to the wall, and if they're likely to need to step out, close to the door as well. So, when you're next attending a meeting, ask yourself as you go into the room, what role do I want to play, and therefore what is the ideal position for me? And if you go to a regular meeting and everyone sits in their regular positions, ask yourself, do I want to shake things up a bit? Why don't I sit somewhere different to see how that changes the dynamic? Please give us a thumbs up if you like this video. There's loads more great management courses content to come, so please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of it. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, keep learning.